Several states are relying on mail-in ballot systems as a safer way to vote during the coronavirus pandemic. But in Pennsylvania, a surge of mail-in ballots left election officials counting votes days after the state's primary elections last week. State leaders are worried that this is just a preview of problems we'll see in November. CBS News campaign reporter Zak Hudak has been following this story, and he joins me now from Pittsburgh. Good to see you again, Zak. So what challenges did election officials face during Pennsylvania's primary last week?
Elaine, this was the first election in Pennsylvania where anyone could vote by mail. In the past, you could apply for an absentee ballot, if you're in the military or out of state or something. But in the fall, the state legislature had passed a bill to allow no excuse absentee voting. Now, that came, and then almost right after, as the year started, Pennsylvania begins getting hit with coronavirus. A few months ago, the legislature postponed the primary a month, giving people more time to apply to vote by mail. And what we ended up with was over 1.8 million Pennsylvanians applying to vote by mail, which was about 17 times more than in 2016. Now, counties in the past really didn't deal with counting votes by mail. They were counting maybe 100,000 in an election, and the process of counting those takes much longer than counting an in-person ballot. Someone goes in person, they place their paper ballot into the machine, and it's tallied. It is on a memory stick that can, then be uploaded at the end of the night. With a mail-in ballot, there are two envelopes that have to be opened, and then after that, there's a ballot itself where you have to check the signature, flatten it out, and then put it in a scanner. And overwhelmingly, elections offices across the state are struggling to do that days after the election. Even in Philadelphia, as of their latest update today at 2:00, they still have about 20,000 ballots that they had received by June 2nd that they still haven't tallied. That's in addition to about 15,000 that they received after that June 2nd election day that, due to an executive order from the governor, they'll also be counting. So really, what has happened here is that days after the election, results are still coming in, and elections officials say that could happen in November.
I mean, it's pretty remarkable to hear that that is taking place even now. So Pennsylvania, of course, is this battleground state, and if it experiences similar issues in November, do we have a sense how might this impact the presidential election?
Well, it is particularly complicated in November because in a typical year in Pennsylvania, the results that come in after Election Day already begin to skew Democratic. That's something that a professor at OSU, Ed Foley, has dubbed the blue shift. Now, typically, that's only by about 20,000 votes or so. But with this big shift to mail-in voting, what we've seen is more than twice as many Democrats in the state have applied to vote by mail as Republicans. So what Professor Foley says is that we could see that blue shift really magnified this election. Now, President Donald Trump has already questioned previous elections that have had counting after the fact. Notably, in 2018, he tweeted about the Florida midterm election that he thought ballots were showing up out of thin air and that we must go with election night. So that's worried strategists in the state about what kind of doubt could be inserted in the results if things are really shifting after November 3rd.
Wow, that's a really good point. Ultimately, Zak, is it clear what Pennsylvania needs to do to have better success come November?
Well, and there are a couple things that elections officials across the state brought up to me. The most common one is just to start counting ballots earlier. The way the law is set right now, you can't begin opening those mail-in ballots until the morning of Election Day. How early would they need to count is questionable because some said in November it might take up to 2 weeks if they wanted to have results by election night. The other things that can help are adding staff. That's a problem with starting early in Philadelphia, where they've had really these tremendous problems. One of their city commissioners told me that even if she was able to start counting a week early, she doesn't have the staff to do that. Her staff is answering phones, dealing with setting up polling places, doing things like that. The other thing that can help is high-speed tabulators. In Allegheny County, here where I am, they added a few of those this year, and they were actually able to get through all of their mail-in ballots on election night by about 3 in the morning, having added significant staff, but they were still checking ballots the next day. So there are things that can be done, and the state senator who actually introduced Act 77 last year, the bill that expanded mail-in voting. I spoke to her, and she said there are definitely things in the works. Legislators are working to move forward. And at the end of last week, Governor Wolf's administration said they would support moving the date forward that counties could begin counting.
So it sounds like they're starting at least to implement some of the changes that you talked about. All right, before we let you go, Zach, you have some new reporting on Democratic leaders in Pennsylvania. They criticized the Trump administration ahead of Vice President Pence's trip to Pittsburgh. What did they say?
Lane, the state Democratic chair, Nancy Patton Mills, said this morning that she doesn't know why the Trump administration is having this tour kickoff here that is based sort of on victory and on doing well, when in fact they have completely bumbled the pandemic response. She pointed to unemployment in Pennsylvania. 2 million people have filed for unemployment in the past few months, and said that Pennsylvanians need to keep that in mind as Vice President Pence tries to distract from that while he's in the state. Something that Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman brought up is that in 61 of the 67 counties in the state over the past week, there have been Black Lives Matter protests. And he pointed to that as a sign that in the state, there really could be mobilization of Democratic voters.
It'll be interesting to see how that issue plays out here. We're now less than, 5 months out from the election. Zak Hudak for us. Zach, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lynn.